This is a 6 kilogram Boston butt. It's big, it's juicy, and it's tender because we're making pulled pork.
Big thanks to Kamado Joe for sponsoring this episode.
There she is, a beautiful Boston bud. 6 kilograms, aka about 13, 14 pounds. Look at that. Look at the marbling on this beautiful piece of meat. And that marbling is going to make sure that we're going to get a very tasty pulled pork. Because once that fat renders down, it's all going to be juice in between the pulled pork fibers. Sitting on top of this Boston bud, I'm going to leave that on. Because if I cut that off, I'm going to lose a little bit of, well, heaviness. But at the same time, I'm also going to lose some of the juiciness at the end of the pulled pork. You see, good tasting pulled pork needs a lot of fat. But of course, you don't want to eat humps of fat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to score it, and that's going to help render down the fat. Just going to run my knife across. You don't have to worry with pulled pork to make it very, very neat or have it to look really good. Because in the end, it's all about getting it pulled, getting it done. There we go. And now we're going to do the same thing across. And besides rendering the fat, this is also going to allow for the seasoning to get into the pulled pork and still build up a beautiful crust. And for my seasoning, I'm going to be using the Pitmaster pork seasoning, of course. This is the perfect seasoning to make pulled pork with. I'm going to put on a nice thick layer of this. Let's flip this around and do the same thing on the other side. Now, of course, we're going to give this some time to stick to the meat. I didn't put any binder on this because I just got this out of the package. It's still a little moist, and it's plenty of moisture to bind the seasoning. Now, of course, I love to put on mustard. It's one of my favorite binders, mustard and mayonnaise. But with pulled pork, you really want to build up a bigger crust as possible. So I'm gonna get as much seasoning on there. You know, we're really going to need all that seasoning to get a little bit of bark. There we go. I'm gonna do a 2-stage seasoning. I'm just gonna get as much as I can on right now. I'm gonna let it sit, and I'm gonna apply some more seasoning before we're gonna put this on the barbecue. And what that's going to do is all of the salt that sits in here and a little bit of sugar is going to draw some of that moisture out of the Boston butt, and it's going to make for a wet crust. And then if we re-season it, we're basically creating a binder with this layer. So now I've got to put some charcoal in, and I already have some leftover charcoal from the last cook at the bottom. Because with the Kamado Joe, it's always a good thing to have these smaller pieces at the bottom. That way it will ignite faster. Now, anticipating a long cook, that means I'm going to add a little bit more fuel to it. So I'm not going to top it off all the way because that will be too much, but like 2/3 of the way. I'm also going to add a chunk of smoke wood. I'm using beech. It's a light smoke wood, and it's absolutely perfect for a long cook. Especially in ceramic barbecues, you really don't want those heavy styles of flavor. If you put in like a heavy oak or like cherry, you're probably going to have too much smoke flavor on your pulled pork. Because what we need is a long time of smoke, but a lighter flavor profile smoke. And that is what beech is perfect for. I'm gonna put in the heat deflectors, make sure they touch in the middle. I'm gonna put the grill grates in at the highest position. I'm going to close the lid. And now I can set the temperature, which is going to be 120 degrees Celsius or 240 degrees Fahrenheit. Now it instructs me to open the top fan just a little. Now the Kamado Joe is starting up automatically. The Kamado Joe is now at a temperature of 121 degrees Celsius. We got plenty of smoke, so it's time to put our Boston butt on. But before we do that, of course, we're going to install a dripping tray. Now you can just let it drip onto the plate, but because the Boston butt is so big, I want to prevent that for the first part of the cook. Now, of course, I can add water if I want to, if I think that the fat is too much and still burning at the bottom of the barbecue, or I can just leave it as it is. Let's apply the final layer of seasoning. We're going to see, look at that. See that? See, this is the fat cap. It doesn't need an extra layer of seasoning really. It's not going to get as moist as the rest, but for the rest, we got that beautiful wet surface. Look at that. It's almost like cakey. And normally you want to prevent caking. Like with the ribs, caking is the worst thing that you can have. But in this case, with a Boston butt, you want to build up as much as you can. Look at that. Double layer of seasoning. Amazing. Bustin' Bud doesn't get more beautiful than this. Fully loaded, fully packed. Look at that. Isn't she a beauty? Let's put it on. There we go. Fat cap pointing down. And of course, we're going to add a thermometer probe, which you're just going to plug in to the barbecue and then stick in right there. And now we can close the lid. Let the barbecue come up to temperature again. And then we're just going to let it smoke for hours and hours on end. So after 6 hours and 20 minutes, we finally hit a 70 degrees core temperature on our beautiful Bustin' Bud. Then it's time to check, because 70 degrees is when the meat stops taking on smoke flavor, and basically you're laying on the smoke. And this is what it looks like after 6 hours and 20 minutes. That's crazy. It's just crazy to think about. It takes 6 hours to get to 70 degrees Celsius. Imagine where we'll be before we're going to hit the 98 degrees Celsius, and that is the moment that it's going to fall apart on us. I got my heat resistant gloves on. I'm going to take the tray with grease. There we go, a little extra flavor. Now there's no need to add anything else to this. This has got plenty of flavor, it's got plenty of juice once the fat renders down completely. All I need to do now is just wrap it up. And of course, I gotta make sure that this is gonna be fluid tight. I can't have the juices dripping out of it. Just roll it up from the sides. And that is one fluid tight package. This can go back on the barbecue. Now I'm going to take the probe and put it back in, probably at an angle because of the bone, like that. And I'm going to raise the temperature in the barbecue. Of course, I could let it run at 120 degrees Celsius, but it doesn't make any sense time-wise, and it's not going to change anything for the pulled pork. You see, pulled pork is very forgiving, because after you're done cooking, it's all going to come together again. Therefore, I'm going to hit the thermometer button, and I'm going to raise the temperature up to 140 degrees Celsius, which is about 280 degrees, 290 degrees Fahrenheit. And now we just have to be patient. At this point in time, I'm thinking we still need to go through the 88, like the whole stall thing where everything disintegrates. We still have the bone in. I'm thinking at least another 6 hours. So 12 hours in total, maybe 17 hours. This is what I'm thinking. We'll see. Put down below in the comments what you think at this point, right now. Don't cheat and go, put it in now. We'll have a little wager, and then afterwards amend your comment and say what it really was. And surprise, surprise, the pulled pork is done a lot sooner than I expected. We are now at 9 hours and 40 minutes and the pulled pork is done. At least it says so. The temperature is 98 degrees Celsius according to the thermometer. Of course, I'm going to check to make sure that is definitely done. 97 on the probe. Let's get the pulled pork off the grill. Carefully lift this up and move it towards the tray. The trick is to get all of the juices into the tray without spilling it. And you gotta be really careful because this is close to boiling temperatures and most of it is grease. So if you get burned, it's gonna hurt. Oh, that's hot. Look at that. I wanna capture, whoa, all the juices. Well, it did get all the juices. Didn't get all the meat straight in. This is gonna give you a really good idea. Let's get that back in. Look at that. Now you can see how tender this is. This really is fall apart tender. No need for claws or anything, but look at the amount of moisture that we got. The trick is the amount of moisture and juice that we got out of the pulled pork and captured within the aluminum foil. Because if I start squeezing this, let me first grab that bone, get that out. Look at that. And then it's time to start pulling, basically just squeezing a little bit. And trust me, this is going to be the juiciest pulled pork you've ever had. And for this exact reason, I recommend not wrapping your pulled pork in butcher's paper because you're going to lose too much moisture. And I recommend wrapping it as soon as you like the bark and you like the color on the outside of the pork. Once you got that crust, you got something amazing. And then of course there's no need for resting because there's no such thing as bringing the juice back into its place letting things melt even further. The pulled pork needs to be cooked all the way through. If it's not at this consistency, you just need to keep cooking. If you don't feel like that thermometer is just falling through, you have no resistance at all, you need to keep on cooking. So I had some stuff right here, which I was going to make a little bit of like a vinegar-based, like a pulled pork. It's not a sauce, not a barbecue sauce. It's more of a spritz and add-on. And for that, I would use 1 part vinegar, half a part sugar, and then a 1/4 part ketchup, a tablespoon of yuzu. That is like a Japanese citrus. It's going to bring a little bit of acidity, but also like a lemon style of flavor. And then I would add a tablespoon of Worcester sauce. And then all you need to do is just give it a good shake. Perform a little taste test, and it should be very, very sour and with a little bit of hint of sweetness. Perfect. And then take a little bit of that pulled pork. Normally, of course, you have sandwich, you put the pulled pork on, but I'm just gonna dip this. And basically, the acidity is gonna balance out the fattiness of the pulled pork. Oh, spot on. It's bright, it's flavorful, it's juicy, it's tender. Of course, a little extra boost with the flavors to your liking is going to give your pulled pork the unique signature from which you will separate yourselves from any other pulled pork. And then, well, the rest is history. It is gold, pure gold. See you guys in the next video. I got still plenty of time to eat a couple of sandwiches. Cheers, guys.